Margaret sat at her kitchen table, the sun filtering through the lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the worn wooden surface. At 72, her hands were etched with the map of a life lived simply, yet the grooves told stories of love, loss, and enduring hope. As she stirred her tea, she couldn't help but let her mind wander to Elizabeth, her estranged daughter. A mix of nostalgia and anxiety swirled within her as she thought about the unexpected visit she had planned. It had been years since she last saw Elizabeth. The memories of their time together were like faded photographs, each one holding a moment of joy, laughter, and warmth. Margaret recalled the days when they would bake cookies together, their laughter filling the small kitchen with a melody of happiness. Elizabeth had been a bright-eyed girl then, full of dreams and ambitions. But time and circumstance had pulled them apart, and the distance between them felt insurmountable now. Margaret picked up the small gift she had wrapped so carefully, a locket that had once belonged to Elizabeth. She remembered how the young girl had cherished it, wearing it around her neck like a talisman. It contained a tiny picture of the two of them, taken on a sunny day at the park. Margaret's heart ached at the thought that Elizabeth had left behind not just her childhood home, but also the essence of who they had been together. "What if she doesn't want to see me?" Margaret whispered to herself, her voice trembling slightly. She shook her head, dispelling the thought. "No, I must believe she will be happy to see me. I can't let fear dictate my actions anymore." With renewed determination, she placed the locket back in the small box and closed it gently, as if sealing away her doubts. As the day wore on, Margaret prepared for her journey to Elizabeth's mansion. She dressed in her best clothes, a modest floral dress that had once brought her joy. It felt strange to think about visiting her daughter in such an opulent home, one that was a world away from the small, cozy cottage they had shared for so many years. Yet, she felt a flicker of hope ignite within her, a hope that perhaps their relationship could be mended. The drive through the city was surreal. Margaret was struck by the stark contrast between her humble surroundings and the lavish neighborhoods that sprawled before her. The buildings grew taller and more extravagant as she approached Elizabeth's mansion. Her heart raced at the thought of stepping into the life Elizabeth had built for herself. "Look at this place," she muttered under her breath, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. "How did it come to this? We used to be so close." Memories flashed through her mind like a film reel. Family dinners, birthdays filled with laughter, and the day Elizabeth left for college, a bittersweet moment that had marked the beginning of their estrangement. Margaret parked her old sedan in front of the mansion, staring at the grand entrance framed by meticulously manicured hedges. The house was a magnificent structure, with towering columns and expansive windows that gleamed in the afternoon sun. It felt surreal to think that Elizabeth lived here, a life of luxury, so far removed from the simplicity that had once defined them. She took a deep breath, letting the fresh air fill her lungs as she gathered her courage. "This is it, Margaret. You can do this," she whispered to herself, clutching the small gift tightly. Her heart thumped in her chest as she approached the door, each step echoing her apprehension. Standing at the doorstep, she hesitated for a moment, her hand hovering just above the ornate doorbell. What if this was a mistake? What if Elizabeth was too far gone, too wrapped up in her new life, to remember the love they once shared? But the fear of never trying was even more daunting than the fear of rejection. With a resolute breath, she knocked firmly on the door, the sound reverberating through her entire being. As she waited, Margaret's mind raced with possibilities. She envisioned Elizabeth opening the door with a smile, perhaps even embracing her with open arms. "Oh, Mom, I've missed you so much." The thought made her heart flutter, but the reality of the situation loomed heavy in the air. Would Elizabeth even recognize her mother after all these years? Would she be willing to confront the distance that had grown between them? The door creaked open slowly, and Margaret's heart sank as she was greeted not by Elizabeth, but by a glamorous young woman in her 30s. The woman had striking features, her hair cascading in soft waves around her shoulders. She wore a fitted dress that spoke of elegance and sophistication, embodying the world Margaret had only glimpsed from afar. "Hello, can I help you?" the woman asked, her voice warm yet tinged with professional detachment. Margaret took a moment to process the scene before her. "I'm here to see Elizabeth," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course. I'm Sophie, Elizabeth's assistant," the woman replied with a polite smile. "Please come in." Margaret stepped across the threshold, her heart heavy with disappointment. She had come to see her daughter, not someone who seemed to belong to another world entirely. The interior of the mansion was breathtaking, adorned with luxurious furnishings and artwork that spoke of wealth and status. It felt foreign to Margaret, who had spent her life in modest surroundings. "Is Elizabeth around?" Margaret asked hesitantly, trying to mask her unease. Sophie gestured towards the grand staircase. "She's preparing for a charity event, but she should be available shortly. Would you like to wait in the sitting room?" Margaret nodded, her heart sinking further. "Yes, that would be fine." As she followed Sophie into the opulent sitting room, Margaret couldn't help but feel the weight of her own insecurities. She glanced around, taking in the lavish decor, a stark contrast to the worn but cozy home she had left behind. The walls were adorned with framed photographs, each one depicting a life Margaret no longer recognized. "Can I get you something to drink?" Sophie asked, her tone polite but somewhat distant. "No, thank you," Margaret replied, her voice trembling. I just want to see Elizabeth." Sophie smiled gently, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I understand. I'm sure she'll be down soon." As Margaret sat on the plush sofa, she felt like an intruder in her own daughter's life. The anticipation of seeing Elizabeth was laced with a growing sense of dread. What would she say? How would their reunion unfold? Would they be able to bridge the chasm that had formed between them? She closed her eyes for a moment, allowing memories of happier times to wash over her. The bond they had shared felt fragile, yet enduring, a flickering flame that refused to be extinguished. Margaret clutched the small locket in her hands, the cool metal grounding her amidst the whirlwind of emotions. "Please, let it be worth it," she whispered to herself, hoping that this visit would mark the beginning of healing, not just for her but for Elizabeth as well. As she waited, Margaret couldn't shake the feeling that the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. But she reminded herself of the love they once shared, a love worth fighting for. With a heart full of hope, she sat in the grand sitting room, waiting for the daughter she had missed for so long. The door swung open, and Margaret's heart dropped at the sight before her. Instead of the familiar face of her daughter, Elizabeth, she was met with the bright smile of a glamorous woman in her 30s. Dressed in a tailored suit, the woman had an air of confidence that intimidated Margaret. "Hello, you must be Margaret. I'm Sophie, Elizabeth's assistant," she said, her voice warm yet polished, like the fine china that surrounded them in the lavish foyer. Margaret felt a pang of disappointment wash over her. She had envisioned this moment for so long, filled with dreams of an emotional reunion. But instead, she stood before a stranger. "Yes, I'm Margaret," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I came to see my daughter." Sophie's smile didn't falter, but it shifted slightly to one of sympathy. "Of course. Elizabeth is just busy with a charity event right now. Come in, please." She stepped aside, gesturing for Margaret to enter the mansion. As she crossed the threshold, Margaret felt a wave of disorientation. The opulence of the mansion was overwhelming. Polished marble floors gleamed under the ornate chandeliers, and the walls were adorned with expensive artwork that seemed to mock her modest upbringing. Memories of her small, simple home flooded her mind, and she felt out of place, like a ghost haunting a world she no longer recognized. "Would you like something to drink while you wait?" Sophie offered, her voice breaking through Margaret's reverie. Margaret shook her head, her throat suddenly dry. "No, thank you. I just want to see Elizabeth." Sophie nodded, her expression shifting to one of understanding. "I understand. She'll be here shortly. It's just that this event has kept her quite busy." Margaret nodded, forcing a smile. "I see. I just hope she hasn't forgotten about me." The words slipped out before she could catch them, revealing her vulnerability. Sophie's eyes softened. "I don't think she could ever forget you, Margaret. Family is important to her, even if it doesn't always seem that way. She's been under a lot of pressure lately." Margaret could only nod, her heart a mix of hope and dread. "I just want to make things right. We used to be so close." Sophie studied Margaret for a moment, a hint of compassion in her gaze. "Families can be complicated, but it's never too late to reconnect," she said gently. "I believe she'll appreciate your effort." As the minutes dragged on, Margaret stood in the grand foyer, her mind racing with memories of Elizabeth. She recalled the laughter they once shared, the bedtime stories, the way they would sit and watch the stars together on warm summer nights. She remembered the day Elizabeth left for college, her heart filled with pride mixed with sadness. The years of estrangement felt like a chasm that had grown wider with each passing moment. "Margaret!" Sophie's voice broke through her thoughts, and Margaret turned to find her looking a bit uneasy. I hope it's not too forward of me, but I'd like to say something." "Of course," Margaret replied, her curiosity piqued. "I've seen how much Elizabeth cares about her family, even if she struggles to show it. She may be distant, but she has a good heart," Sophie said, her voice steady. "I think she's just afraid of confronting the past." Margaret's heart sank, the weight of Sophie's words settling heavily on her chest. "Afraid?" she echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would she be afraid of me?" Sophie hesitated, her expression thoughtful. "Sometimes, when people achieve a lot, they feel a disconnect from where they came from. It's not easy to reconcile those two worlds." Margaret sighed, her disappointment deepening. "I never wanted her to feel ashamed of our past. I just wanted her to know that I love her, no matter what." Sophie offered a small smile, a flicker of hope. "I think she still knows that deep down. You just have to give her a chance to realize it." Margaret was about to respond when the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Her heart raced as she turned toward the sound, only to find Sophie looking over her shoulder, her expression shifting to one of mild concern. "Here she comes," Sophie said quietly, stepping back slightly to give Margaret space. The figure of Elizabeth appeared in the doorway, her presence commanding, yet somehow distant. Margaret's breath caught in her throat. Elizabeth had changed. The young woman who had once stood before her, full of dreams and aspirations, now bore the weight of sophistication and an air of detachment. "Margaret," Elizabeth said, her voice cool and formal. "I didn't expect you so soon." A lump formed in Margaret's throat, and she struggled to find her voice. I wanted to see you, Elizabeth. I've missed you." Elizabeth's eyes flickered, but her expression remained guarded. "I've been busy with work. You know how it is." The words stung, and Margaret felt a wave of sorrow wash over her. "I know, but I thought we could talk." "About what?" "The past," Elizabeth replied, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her tone. "I thought we agreed to leave that behind." Margaret took a step forward, her heart racing. "I never wanted to leave you behind. I just wanted to understand, to be a part of your life again." Elizabeth's gaze hardened, and for a moment, it felt like Margaret was staring at a stranger. "I don't know if that's possible, Mom. Things have changed." Sophie, sensing the rising tension, quietly stepped back, leaving the two women to confront the emotional chasm that had grown between them. Margaret's heart ached at the sight of her daughter's cool demeanor, the walls that had been built so high that they seemed insurmountable. "Elizabeth," Margaret said, her voice trembling, "I know I made mistakes, but I never stopped loving you. I want to fix things between us." Elizabeth crossed her arms, her expression conflicted. "It's not that simple, Mom. You don't understand what it's like for me now. The pressures, the expectations, it's overwhelming." Margaret's heart sank further. "I may not understand everything, but I do know that family is worth fighting for. Please, let's try to find common ground." Elizabeth's gaze softened for just a moment, and Margaret saw a flicker of the little girl she once knew. "I don't know if I can," Elizabeth whispered, her voice barely audible. The silence hung between them, heavy with unspoken words and unresolved pain. Margaret longed to reach out, to bridge the gap, but she felt paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. Would Elizabeth ever let her back into her life? Would they ever find their way back to each other? As the moments passed, Margaret realized that this encounter was just the beginning of a long journey, one that would require patience, vulnerability, and perhaps a little help from Sophie. The mansion, with all its grandeur, felt increasingly like a gilded cage, and Margaret knew that the real battle lay ahead, not just in winning back her daughter's affection, but in understanding the woman Elizabeth had become. Margaret's heart raced as she stood in the opulent foyer of Elizabeth's mansion, anticipation mixed with an undercurrent of dread. She had waited so long for this moment, clutching the delicate locket in her pocket, a relic of happier days. The grandeur of the space was overwhelming, gold accents glimmering under the soft light of extravagant chandeliers, and the plush carpet muffling her footsteps. But it was not the lavishness that mattered. It was the daughter she had come to see, the daughter she had lost to a world of wealth and status. Just as she was about to lose herself in her thoughts, the door at the far end of the room swung open, and Elizabeth stepped in. At first glance, she was everything Margaret remembered, tall, poised, with piercing blue eyes that had once sparkled with mischief. But now, there was something different about her. Elizabeth's expression was distant, her brow slightly furrowed, as if she were preoccupied with thoughts far beyond the moment. "Mother," Elizabeth said, her voice flat, lacking the warmth Margaret had longed for. She offered a quick, polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Elizabeth," Margaret exclaimed, a mix of joy and disbelief filling her voice. She took a tentative step forward, her heart leaping at the sight of her daughter. "It's so good to see you." Elizabeth nodded, but her gaze drifted away, scanning the room as if there was something more interesting to look at than the woman standing before her. Margaret's heart sank, but she pushed through, desperate to bridge the gap that had grown so wide between them. "Can we sit down?" Margaret suggested, gesturing toward a plush set of chairs nearby. "I brought you something." "Sure," Elizabeth replied, her tone lacking enthusiasm. She moved to the seating area, sinking into the cushions with an air of weariness. Margaret followed, clutching the locket tightly in her hand, feeling the weight of years of silence pressing down on her. As they settled into their seats, a silence enveloped them, heavy and uncomfortable. Margaret took a deep breath, recalling the many conversations they once shared over cups of tea, laughter spilling into the air like a warm embrace. Now, the space between them felt like an expansive chasm, filled with unsaid words and unresolved pain. "How have you been?" Margaret ventured, her voice soft as she tried to pierce through Elizabeth's defenses. "I'm busy," Elizabeth replied curtly, her focus shifting to the intricate patterns on the carpet. "You know how it is." Margaret's heart ached at the dismissive tone. "I understand you have a lot going on, but I want to see how you're doing." "I missed you, dear." Elizabeth's eyes flickered with something. Was it annoyance? Or perhaps a flicker of guilt? Yet, whatever it was vanished as quickly as it appeared. "I'm fine, really. Just busy." Margaret's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the locket tighter. "I found this while I was cleaning out some old things," she continued, hoping to spark a connection. "It's the locket I gave you when you were a little girl. Remember?" Elizabeth's expression remained unchanged, a mask of indifference that made Margaret's heart sink further. "I don't really remember much from that time," she said, a hint of impatience creeping into her voice. The familiar pain of rejection pierced Margaret's heart. "We had good times, didn't we? We used to go to the park, just you and me, and I would push you on the swings." "I guess," Elizabeth interrupted, her tone dismissive. "But that was a long time ago, Mom. Things are different now." Margaret's throat tightened as she fought back tears. "I know things have changed, but I still want to be part of your life. I want to understand who you've become." Elizabeth's gaze hardened. "Do you really think you can just waltz back and like nothing happened? You didn't even try to reach out all those years." Margaret flinched at the accusation. "I tried, Elizabeth. I tried to call, to write. But you," her voice faltered. "You didn't respond. I thought you didn't want me in your life anymore." "It wasn't that simple," Elizabeth snapped, her frustration spilling over. "You wouldn't understand." "Then help me understand," Margaret pleaded, desperation lacing her voice. "I'm here now. Please, let's talk. I don't want to lose you again." A tense silence followed, thick with unspoken words and buried emotions. Elizabeth stared at the ground, her fingers fidgeting with the fabric of her dress, and for a moment, Margaret thought she might finally reach her daughter. But then, Elizabeth's walls slammed back into place. "I have a lot going on," she said, her voice clipped. "I can't just sit here and reminisce about the past." Margaret felt defeated, her heart heavy with the weight of rejection. "I just want to connect with you, Elizabeth. I missed you so much. Is there truly nothing left of the bond we had?" Elizabeth's eyes flicked up, finally locking onto Margaret's with a flash of something. Anger, perhaps? "You think it's that easy? You think a nice cup of tea and a few sentimental words will erase the years of absence?" Margaret's voice trembled as she spoke. "I thought maybe it could be a start. I thought—" She hesitated, her throat tight. "I thought you might want to try too." "Maybe I don't want to," Elizabeth countered, her voice cold as ice. "Maybe I like my life the way it is now." Margaret swallowed hard, the lump in her throat threatening to choke her. She took the locket from her pocket, holding it out towards Elizabeth. "This was a part of our past, a part of you. I just wanted you to have it back." Elizabeth glanced at the locket, but her expression remained unyielding. "I don't need it." The rejection stung more than Margaret expected. "But it's a symbol of our connection, Elizabeth. It meant something once." "Once," Elizabeth echoed, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "That was a long time ago. Please, just think about it," Margaret urged, her heart breaking. "I want to know you again, to be part of your life." "I need to go," Elizabeth said abruptly, standing up. I have things to do. Margaret's chest tightened as she watched her daughter walk away, the distance between them feeling insurmountable. "Elizabeth, please," she called out, desperation lacing her voice. But Elizabeth paused for a moment, her back still turned. "I can't do this right now," she said, her voice muffled. "Then when? Will there ever be a time?" Margaret's voice trembled, a mix of sorrow and frustration. Elizabeth turned slightly, her face still hidden, but her shoulders were tense. "I don't know, Mother. I just don't know." With that, she strode out of the room, leaving Margaret alone in the extravagant space, the silence echoing back at her like a cruel reminder of all she had lost. The locket slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor, a small sound in the vast emptiness, but it resonated louder in Margaret's heart than all the words they hadn't shared. She sank back into the plush chair, tears streaming down her cheeks, a profound sense of loneliness wrapping around her like a shroud. The dream of a reunion, of mending their fractured relationship, felt more distant now than ever. As the conversation grew increasingly strained, Margaret's gaze drifted toward a framed photo that hung on the wall. It was a vibrant image of Elizabeth, beaming with happiness, her arm intertwined with a charming man named David. The sight pierced Margaret's heart, a mixture of jealousy and sadness flooding over her. Was this the life Elizabeth had chosen, filled with laughter and love, while she remained an outsider? A knot formed in her stomach as she fought back tears. "Who's that with you, dear?" Margaret asked, her voice trembling slightly as she pointed toward the photograph, hoping to ignite some warmth in their interaction. Elizabeth's expression shifted instantly, a shadow crossing her face. "That's David," she replied tersely, her tone clipped and defensive. "He's important to me." "Important," Margaret echoed, her curiosity battling with a sense of foreboding. "He seems lovely. You look so happy together." Elizabeth's eyes narrowed, a flicker of irritation igniting in them. "I don't think this is the right time to discuss him," she snapped, her fingers drumming against the delicate china cup, the sound grating against Margaret's nerves. Margaret felt the walls closing in around her, the space between them thick with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. "Elizabeth, I just want to know more about your life. About you. I've missed so much. I'm trying to understand." "Understand?" Elizabeth scoffed, her voice rising. "You think it's that simple? You think you could just stroll back in after all these years and suddenly know everything about me?" "Please, I'm not trying to intrude," Margaret pleaded, her heart aching. "I came here hoping we could reconnect, to bridge the gap that's grown between us." The coldness in Elizabeth's demeanor was palpable, and Margaret felt her heart sink further. The daughter she once knew seemed to have vanished, replaced by a stranger wrapped in layers of pride and hurt. Just as Margaret was about to speak again, the door to the room creaked open, and Sophie entered with an air of urgency. "Excuse me, Elizabeth. I need to speak with you." "It's urgent," Sophie said, her voice low and serious. Margaret's heart quickened as she sensed a shift in the atmosphere. "Can it wait?" Elizabeth snapped, her patience wearing thin. Sophie hesitated, glancing at Margaret before continuing. "I really don't think it can. It's about David." At the mention of his name, Elizabeth's face paled slightly, and she quickly stood up. "What happened?" Margaret's heart raced, caught in a whirlwind of emotions. She watched as Elizabeth's composure began to unravel, her usual bravado replaced by concern. The photograph that had once sparked jealousy now felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the urgency of the present. "Let's talk in the other room," Sophie suggested, her voice steady, yet laced with tension. Elizabeth nodded, casting a quick, apologetic glance at Margaret before following Sophie out of the room. Margaret sat there, her mind swirling with questions. What could possibly be wrong? The unease that had settled in the pit of her stomach deepened. She had come here to reconnect, to mend the broken bonds. Yet it felt as if every attempt was met with barriers far more complicated than she had anticipated. She glanced at the locket she had brought with her, the small, delicate piece of jewelry that once held so much meaning between them. It felt insignificant now, lost in the weight of their unresolved issues. As she fidgeted with it, Margaret's thoughts drifted back to the years they had spent apart. She remembered the countless nights spent wondering about Elizabeth. If she was happy, if she thought about her, if she had found someone to love her the way Margaret had loved her. When would her daughter realize that beneath the layers of wealth and status was still the little girl who had once sought her comfort? The minutes dragged on, each second echoing in the silence of the grand foyer. Margaret stood up, pacing slightly as anxiety buzzed in her chest. She could hear muffled voices from the other room, the tension palpable even from a distance. The sound of Sophie's calm but firm tone contrasted sharply with Elizabeth's rising agitation. Margaret's heart sank further as she imagined her daughter's frustration, wondering if she was being pushed further away rather than drawn close. What was David hiding? Why did he cause such a shift in her daughter's demeanor? In that moment, Margaret felt a surge of protective instinct for Elizabeth, a fierce urge to shield her from the shadows lurking around her. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Elizabeth and Sophie re-entered the room. Elizabeth's face was flushed, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Sophie stepped back, discreetly standing by the door, her presence a silent reminder of the tension that loomed in the air. "Margaret," Elizabeth said softly, her voice trembling. I need to talk to you about something." Margaret's heart raced, a mixture of hope and dread flooding her. "What is it, dear?" she asked, her voice gentle, encouraging. Elizabeth's gaze fell to the floor, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "It's about David. There are things you don't know. I thought I could trust him, but—" "Elizabeth," Margaret interrupted, leaning forward, her heart aching for the pain she saw etched on her daughter's face. "You don't have to protect me from the truth. I want to understand. Whatever it is, just tell me. I thought he was good for me," Elizabeth admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought he loved me, but now, I'm not so sure. I've heard things, seen things, and I'm scared." Margaret's heart twisted at Elizabeth's admission. "Scared? About what?" "About him. About what he might do. I don't know who to trust anymore," Elizabeth confessed, her eyes shining with vulnerability. Margaret felt a surge of empathy wash over her, the distance between them momentarily closing. "You could trust me, Elizabeth. I'm here. Always have been, even from afar." Elizabeth's gaze met her mother's, and for a brief moment, Margaret saw a flicker of the little girl she once knew, buried beneath layers of hurt and disappointment. But just as quickly, that flicker faded, replaced by the cold reality of their estrangement. "I don't know if I can do this," Elizabeth said, her voice trembling as she looked away. "Everything is just so complicated." Margaret felt the weight of her daughter's turmoil pressing down on her. "I understand that it's complicated, but I want to help you. Please let me in. Don't push me away again." Elizabeth's expression hardened, and she shook her head. "It's not that simple, Mom. You don't know what it's like. You don't know what I've sacrificed to get here." Margaret's heart sank once more. "Elizabeth, I know you have fought hard for your life, but that doesn't mean you have to face it alone. I'm here for you. Just let me be part of your life again." But as the words left her lips, Margaret realized that the distance between them was still vast, filled with years of pain and misunderstandings. Elizabeth's walls were high, and the battle to break them down was just beginning. As the silence stretched between them, Margaret's heart ached for the daughter she had lost and the woman who now stood before her, facing her own demons. She didn't know how to reach her, but she felt an undeniable pull to try, no matter how difficult the path ahead would be. With every moment that passed, Margaret understood that this reunion was just the beginning, a fragile step toward healing, but fraught with challenges that neither of them had anticipated. And as she sat there, waiting for Elizabeth to find her voice once more, Margaret couldn't shake the feeling that the true storm was yet to come. The silence that filled the grand foyer after Sophie's departure was heavy, a palpable weight that made Margaret's heart race. She glanced at Elizabeth, who remained seated, her fingers idly tracing the rim of her teacup, as if the delicate china could offer her some solace. Margaret felt a surge of emotion. The vibrant daughter she once knew had been replaced by a distant figure wrapped in layers of wealth and guarded secrets. "Elizabeth," Margaret began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I came here because I want to reconnect with you. I miss you. I miss us." Elizabeth looked up, her expression a mixture of surprise and defensiveness. "Reconnecting? After all this time?" "It's not that simple, Mom," she replied sharply, her tone cutting through the air like a knife. "You don't understand what it's like for me now." Margaret's heart sank at the dismissal in her daughter's voice. "I may not understand everything, but I want to try. I want to know what you're feeling, what you're going through." Do you really?" Elizabeth interrupted, leaning forward, her eyes blazing with a mixture of hurt and anger. "You think it's easy for me to just forget? To pretend that everything is fine when I have to deal with people who only care about my money? I had to build this life on my own, and you weren't there to see how hard it was." Margaret felt the sting of those words. "I know I made mistakes," she replied, her voice trembling. "But I never stopped loving you. I thought that maybe we could start over. I brought you something." She hesitated, then pulled out the locket, its surface shining in the chandelier light. "This was yours. It belonged to you as a child." Elizabeth's eyes softened momentarily as she looked at the locket, but the vulnerability quickly vanished. "A locket won't fix everything, Mom. You can't just waltz back into my life and expect me to forgive you for all those years of absence. I'm not here to make excuses," Margaret said, her voice rising with desperation. "I'm here because I want to understand. I want to know you again. I want to share in your life, even if it's different from the one we used to have." "Different?" Elizabeth scoffed, crossing her arms defensively. "You don't have a clue. This life comes with expectations, with pressure. I'm not just Elizabeth anymore. I'm the face of charity, a brand, a target for everyone who wants to take advantage. It's suffocating." Margaret's heart ached as she listened to her daughter's words, the sheer weight of them pressing down on her. "I can't imagine how hard it must be for you," she said softly, the maternal instinct within her driving her to reach out. "But you don't have to carry it all alone. I'm here now. Let me help you. Help me." Elizabeth laughed bitterly, the sound echoing harshly in the opulent room. "You think you can help me after abandoning me? You don't even know who I am anymore." Margaret felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them away. "Maybe I don't know everything about your life, but I know you, Elizabeth. I know the girl who loved to read on the porch, who used to dream big. I know you're still in there somewhere." Elizabeth's expression flickered, a moment of hesitation before she hardened again. "Those dreams don't matter anymore. I have responsibilities now. I can't just walk away from everything I built." "Built?" Margaret echoed, feeling a wave of frustration wash over her. "At what cost? Your happiness? Your family? I'm standing right in front of you, and you're pushing me away." "I'm not pushing you away." Elizabeth shot back, her voice rising. I'm protecting myself. You don't understand the sacrifices I've had to make. Do you think I wanted this life? It's not a fairy tale, Mom. It's a trap. Margaret took a step closer, her heart pounding. Then let me in. Let me help you find a way out. We can face it together. But Elizabeth turned away, her hands trembling slightly. You don't get it. There's no way out. Not without destroying everything I've worked for. Just then, a loud crash reverberated from the other room, startling both women. The sound shattered the tense atmosphere, and they exchanged wide-eyed glances. What was that? Margaret asked, her voice filled with concern. I don't know. Elizabeth replied, her voice tense. Stay here. She stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the polished floor as she moved toward the source of noise. Margaret hesitated but followed, her heart racing with anxiety. As they entered the adjoining room, they found a scene that made their hearts drop. David, Elizabeth's charming boyfriend, stood over a broken vase, shards of porcelain scattered like fallen soldiers around him. His expression was one of anger, and beside him, Sophie looked flustered, her hands on her hips as she attempted to regain control of the situation. What happened? Elizabeth demanded, her voice sharp. David turned, his face flushed with frustration. Nothing. Just a little accident. That's all, he said dismissively, though his eyes darted between the two women, as if assessing the damage. Sophie stepped forward, her demeanor serious. David, we need to talk. It's important. Elizabeth crossed her arms, her demeanor shifting as she took in the tension. What's going on? Why do you look so worried? David brushed off the concern, but Margaret felt an instinctual chill. Maybe you should listen to her, she suggested, her voice steady. If something is wrong, it's better to address it now. Mom, I can handle my life. Elizabeth snapped, her irritation flaring again. But Margaret's gaze remained fixed on David, who was now shifting uncomfortably. It seems like there's more to this than just a broken vase, she pressed gently. You're both acting like something is about to explode. David's demeanor hardened. It's nothing for you to worry about, he insisted, his dismissiveness only deepening Margaret's concerns. This is between me and Elizabeth. Margaret felt a surge of protectiveness for her daughter. I think it involves all of us now, doesn't it? She challenged, her voice firm. Suddenly, the air was thick with unspoken words, and the fragile connection between Margaret and Elizabeth wavered once more. The air in the grand mansion was thick with tension as Margaret and Elizabeth rushed into the living room, their hearts pounding from the sudden commotion that had interrupted their fragile reunion. They found David, a striking man with a confident demeanor, engaged in a heated argument with Sophie, Elizabeth's assistant. The stark contrast between the elegant decor of the mansion and the palpable discord in the room was jarring. Get your hands off me, Sophie exclaimed, her voice sharp as she attempted to free herself from David's grasp. Margaret felt a chill run through her. The scene before her was not one of love and support, but rather a deeply unsettling confrontation. Why are you making this harder than it has to be? David countered, his tone smooth but laced with underlying menace. You don't know what you're talking about, Sophie. You're just an employee. You don't have any say in this. Margaret stepped forward, her heart racing. What is going on here? She demanded, her voice shaking slightly. The sight of Sophie's distress and David's aggressive posture ignited a protective instinct within her. She felt the weight of the moment, sensing that the truth of their lives was about to unravel before her. Elizabeth, still reeling from the earlier confrontation with her mother, stood frozen at the threshold. David, let her go, she said, her voice wavering. She took a step closer, her eyes darting between Sophie and David, desperate to understand the conflict. What's happening? David turned to Elizabeth, his charming facade cracking ever so slightly. Sophie is just trying to stir up trouble, Liz. You know I would never do anything to jeopardize your charity. His voice dripped with feigned sincerity, but Margaret could see the flicker of guilt in his eyes. David, stop, Sophie shouted, pulling away from him. You've been embezzling funds from the charity. I found the discrepancies in the accounts. You can't just brush this off. Her words hung in the air like a thunderclap, shocking both Margaret and Elizabeth into a deeper silence. Margaret's breath caught in her throat. Embezzlement? The very word echoed in her mind, intertwining with the feelings of helplessness that had plagued her with Elizabeth's estrangement. She looked at Elizabeth, who was now pale, her eyes wide with disbelief. Is this true? Margaret asked gently, desperate to reach her daughter through the fog of confusion. David laughed coldly, a sound that sent shivers down Margaret's spine. You can't believe her, Liz. She's just trying to sabotage my relationship with you. There's no evidence, just her word against mine. He stepped in closer to Elizabeth, attempting to manipulate her with his charm. You know I would never betray you like that. Elizabeth's gaze softened for a moment as she looked at David, but Margaret seized the opportunity. Elizabeth, she implored, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. You need to see what's happening here. David is using you. Don't let him turn you against the people who care about you. Stop it, Mom. Elizabeth snapped, her frustration boiling over. You don't know anything about my life. You haven't been here for years. But even as she said it, a flicker of doubt crossed her features. Margaret could see the internal struggle warring within her daughter's heart. Maybe I haven't been here, Margaret replied softly, feeling the weight of her own past mistakes. But I'm here now, and I'm not going to let him manipulate you any longer. You deserve to know the truth. David's expression hardened, and he took a step toward Margaret, his eyes narrowing. You're just a bitter old woman trying to ruin everything I've built with your daughter. Why should she believe you over me? Margaret met his gaze, unyielding. Because I've always loved her, even when she was angry at me. I've never tried to take anything from her. I came here to reconnect, not to tear her down. Mom, please, Elizabeth said, her voice trembling. I don't want to choose between you. I just want to understand. Then let's understand together, Margaret urged, her heart racing. Don't let him divide us. Look at what he's doing right now. He's trying to turn you against me, when all I want is to save you from being hurt. David's face contorted with rage. You're poisoning her mind. You know that? You're trying to make her doubt me. He stepped back, his demeanor shifting from anger to a calculated calm. You're just a distraction, Margaret. I've given Elizabeth a life she could only dream of, and I won't let you ruin it. Is that really what you believe? Margaret asked, her voice low and steady. That money and status can replace love? That they can erase the pain of being alone? Elizabeth's expression flickered as if a light had been turned on inside her. It was a moment of clarity, and Margaret could see her daughter wrestling with the truth. David, I need to know if what Sophie said is true. Are you stealing from the charity? She pressed, her voice stronger now. David's facade began to crack. You don't need to listen to her, Liz, he pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. I've done so much for you. I've sacrificed everything to give you what you wanted. What I wanted was a mother who loved me, not this. Elizabeth's voice quivered, but was resolute. You've lied to me, David. I can't believe you would do this. The tension in the room shifted palpably as Elizabeth took a step back from David, her eyes hardening. I need some time to think, she said, her voice steady as she faced him. And I need to talk to Sophie. David's mask of confidence slipped entirely. You're making a mistake, Liz. You're going to regret this. He turned to Margaret, his eyes blazing with fury. And you're going to ruin everything. You should have stayed away. Margaret stood her ground, feeling a sense of empowerment as she faced the man who had cast a shadow over her daughter's life. No, David, you're the one who's going to regret this. You've underestimated the love that binds us. You can't take that away. Elizabeth glanced at Margaret, a mix of fear and determination in her eyes. I need to know the truth, she said, her voice a whisper. And I want to hear it from both of you. I won't let anyone manipulate me anymore. In that moment, Margaret felt a rush of hope. The barriers that had built up between her and Elizabeth began to crumble. Together, we'll figure this out, she promised. You don't have to face this alone. Elizabeth nodded slowly, her resolve strengthening as she took her mother's hand. Let's do this together. As they stood united against the man who had threatened to tear them apart, Margaret felt a surge of love for her daughter. No matter what lay ahead, this was the moment they had both been waiting for, a chance to rebuild the love they had lost and to confront the darkness together. David, cornered and feeling the weight of their unity, glared at them, but for the first time, he seemed unsure of his power. Margaret and Elizabeth faced him, ready to reclaim their lives and their relationship, prepared to confront the truth that had been hidden for too long.